Welcome to the Amazing Grace Talk podcast. Conversations that explore how God has pursued those He has made in His image. My wife and host, Erika Seamayer-Williamson, is on a journey to meet everyday people who have experienced a radical encounter with the divine presence of unconditional love. These are the stories that remind us why God's grace is amazing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Amazing Grace Talk. My name is Erika Seamayer-Williamson, and I'm the founder of Amazing Grace Retreats, which are weekend getaways in beautiful locations such as the Black Hills of South Dakota, the beaches of Florida, and right here in my home state of Texas. I'll share a little bit more about the retreats at the end of this podcast. But now let's jump right into today's guest. Her name is Anna Slayton, and this topic today is overcoming tragedy and trauma. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I wanted to tell just a little bit about Anna. You know, we met, I think maybe about a year ago. I had heard of Anna's story. Our towns are not that far off where we live, and everyone, I think, heard her tragic story, and I don't really know why. I just felt an extra connection to this story and always just thought, I just want to hug her, is what I felt like. I didn't know her, but then met her through a friend, and when we were hanging out at the pool that day at Melissa's house, and, you know, I knew she was good friends with you, but when we went around introducing people and said, da-da-da, and this is so-and-so, and this is Anna, and you probably thought, what a weirdo, because we both had sunglasses on, but I just stared at you.
It was awesome.
And you looked at me. I don't know. It's like you didn't think it was weird. I stared at you, and you stared at me, and we just stayed looking at each other. And I don't know if you remember what I said, but I said, it was silence. And then I said, I just want to put you in my lap and wrap my arms around you and hug you.
Yeah.
So it was quite the, as tragic as the story is, I was so delighted to meet you and to get to know you. But anyway, I wanted to say a little bit about Anna, that you are a wife and a mother, a nurse practitioner, and also the founder of Kardia Wellness.
Yes, I am.
So you are a busy lady.
I am. Thank you.
Busy lady, and I cannot wait to hear it, for our listeners to hear your story. You know, sometimes in tragedy, God comes to us at a rescue and turns our lives inside out, upside down, and makes our tragedy turn into a ministry. And I know that's what you've told me, your story.
Yes.
What you said, you know, I never knew it was going to be my life and my ministry, but
it is.
You've come to this place. So you want to just start out with the day you got the phone call?
Sure.
Okay. So You were at work, you said, and...
So on New Year's Day, 2017, I was actually like a nurse manager at the time of a freestanding emergency room. And because of the holiday, I was covering hours for my staff so they could have the holiday off. If I were to back up to the events leading to me going to work that day, my husband at the time and I were separated.
Okay.
And prior to leaving that day, we got in a pretty intense argument just related to our separation and things that had led up to that day. And out of anger, I ended up leaving early. And so essentially I didn't even need to be there that day, but I went.
Oh.
And so had been at work for about 3 hours and received a phone call. We were really busy already and short-staffed. So dealing as an emergency room nurse with the things that we have to take care of, which was in front of me at the time, and then receiving a phone call where my husband at the time said, you need to come to my parents' house. Gavin drowned in my parents' pool. And so I had to abandon my shift, which as a nurse is something that we don't ever do. But I had to. And so I left. I drove at least over 100 miles an hour to go to the scene of the accident, which by that time he was transported to the closest hospital. And so I arrived to the hospital. My son Gavin was in the middle of receiving CPR, and I fell to my knees. And 24 hours later, basically, we had to let him off of life support because he had died.
So, wait a minute. You you raced to get over to the house.
Yes.
When you got there, he had already been transported.
I received a phone call in the middle of that drive.
And then
okay. Yeah. So then I went to the hospital.
Okay. And tell us, how old was Gavin?
Gavin was 2.5.
2.5. And at this time, what were you even driving there? What was going through your mind?
So during the time of the separation of my marriage and this whole season that I was going through, I was coming back to my relationship with the Lord. Mm-hmm. And really, I would say with the previous 10 years, God and I we always knew each other, but I didn't know him.
Okay.
And so during the separation of my marriage and all the events that led to that, I just really was trying to find hope with the Lord.
Okay.
So with this newfound relationship with him, knowing that, he is there, okay, and acknowledging his presence in my life.
Okay.
As I was driving to the hospital, I prayed a prayer that came out of my spirit that I never even would have known would have come. And I just said, Lord Jesus, please do not forsake me. Please, God, please. And I just chanted and prayed this like it just came out of me. Mm-hmm. So I will never forget that prayer.
Yeah.
That just came.
So the Holy Spirit just kind of moved in and just did that prayer give you peace, or what were you?
I think that prayer gave me strength
Okay.
to walk into the scene that I did.
Yeah.
Mind you, as I walked into that emergency room, coming from another ER,
I was going to say,
I was surrounded by girls that I had graduated school with, that had applied for jobs with me, with people from the community who knew me. So that in and of itself was intimidating, yet alone the fact that they were working on my child.
Yeah.
And so as I stepped into this room, people were shocked, right? Like that this was Anna's kid.
Right.
And so anyway, God filled me with strength to be able to walk into that room and have courage, have courage to stand there, to have the strength. So I ended up on my knees next to his bed and was just praying over his body, praying for the staff. But at a certain point, I knew, right? But at the same time, for my other children, for our family, for his father, I needed them to continue. Okay.
Yeah.
So
praying for a miracle.
Yeah. Praying for a miracle. And, the difference that I've processed now 3.5 years later, I had to make a decision as a mom, not as a nurse.
Okay.
And so to separate in my mind that, differentiation, I need to do all measures versus as a nurse, I would have said, it's time to stop, I said, keep going. So the ER physician ended up turning to me after they had been working on him for several hours probably. And they said, what else do you need us to do?
Okay.
And so in my head, as a mom and a nurse, well, what's the next critical step? So I said, we need to go to Children's. So they made all the moves that allowed me to fly with Gavin in the helicopter to Children's Hospital in Dallas. And so that in and of itself was rare, of course.
That you even got to fly with him?
Exactly.
Now, was he wasn't breathing on his own? He was...
No, he was on life support.
Life support? Mm-hmm. And you thought, get him to Children's?
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
That's the next step.
Okay.
In my head. So that's what we did. They honored that, which I'm grateful for.
So when you got to Children's Hospital, how long was he there until you had to make that decision?
So funny enough, as soon as I arrived with Gavin, the friend who connected us, Melissa, met me there immediately. And she and I sat outside of his room in the ICU for probably an hour as they continued to try to stabilize him. Mm-hmm. More family arrived, more friends came. We basically filled the entire ICU, holding area. And the doctors in the ICU, they basically, I ended up having a conversation with the surgeon there who I asked, is this going to make any difference? And she told me, she says, we're either going to continue what we're doing for you to say goodbye later, or you guys will have to say goodbye now. And so I chose later. I just kept going in order to buy time for everybody to process and in order to say goodbye. So again, we waited basically through the entire night. Gavin came out of a surgery that was allowing his body to stay on life support by around 6 a.m. And by 10 p.m. that night, we had let him go.
Gosh. It's just overwhelming to even hear the story.
I know.
Being a mother, just kind of takes your breath away. And so at this point, how were you not feeling angry? Did you just feel like you were in complete shock, or were you angry, or were you, what were you feeling at this moment?
I was very angry, Erika.
I would think.
I was very angry. But essentially, after we let Gavin go, we buried him several days later, had the funeral, went through that whole process. And we did do that together, all of us together, both families. But Gavin's funeral was almost the death of that relationship.
Yeah.
So going forward, I would say it was a couple days after the funeral, I had been given like a handful of anxiety medicine in order to kind of just get through that time period. None of this was prescribed to me. And everybody was bringing food and drinks and all those kinds of things to my house. Yeah. So left to my own devices, I had friends staying the night every night, people surrounding my kids. And I remember it was just a couple nights after the funeral, I was left alone for the first time. So I finally was able to face that anger, and I didn't face it the right way. So I ended up, basically I was drinking. I had taken some of that medicine, which both combined end up causing suicidal thoughts and things like that. So I ended up getting into my swimming pool, which was not where the accident happened. But I stood in that pool and yelled at God more than, if my neighbors heard me, they would have thought somebody was getting murdered. It was so angry. Yeah. I was so angry and really contemplated taking my own life in the same way, just because that's where my mind was, right? Yeah. And in that instant moment, I don't know how or why, but my cell phone was sitting on the porch and I heard a message come through. And I just was like, I don't know, I just had to go read it. And it ended up being a message that ended up saving my life from who's now one of my closest friends.
Really?
Yeah. She sent a message saying, that she was actually in the shower and God was talking with her and telling her to reach out. And she sent me a video of a Stephen Curtis Chapman song that basically told me that my life still had purpose despite what I had gone through. Yeah. So it was just crazy. Yeah. So God saved my life that night out of my anger. Yeah. And really put the people into place to help me heal and be where I am today.
Oh my gosh. And I didn't even hear that story.
I know.
When we talked the other day. These God encounters are just, I think it was the magnitude of your passion of surrendering and just, you were angry, but you were screaming basically at God, right? But that's when God listens. Yeah. That's when he hears, and then allowed, that text to come through and allowed you to all of a sudden
my
change
alertness. Yeah, it was so crazy because I wasn't even aware of my phone was even there. I was inebriated. So
came through and saved your life. Well,
it's a miracle.
That is a miracle. And so you have 2 older children.
I do.
Gavin was your youngest.
Yes.
And you were already starting the process of divorce, right? So you weren't even back with him.
No.
Tell me about that next year, kind of how you were trying to cope and what that looked like. And then I want to ask you more about where you ended up.
Sure. It was just really a runaround race trying to just survive for that first year. Basically finalizing a divorce, having my children in counseling. CPS was involved in our life. So I had to deal with weekly meetings with a CPS caseworker.
And that's a nightmare within itself.
Yeah. But I can empathize with people who are going through that because it's terrible. It's terrible. My caseworker was beautiful, but just the whole thing and just the stress and the anxiety on my kids for everything they had to go through. They had to go through multiple interviews because they witnessed their brother's death. They had to go through several counseling programs and play therapy and things like that to get to where they are. So anyway, so we just basically navigated that whole year, you know, holding on by a thread. I ended up starting to talk and date with who I'm now remarried to, who continued to tell me through the whole time that we had met, you need to go to Celebrate Recovery. And I'm like, oh no, that's a place, you know. Long story short, my ex-husband, you know, had addiction problems. And so I really was against the stigma against any kind of program like that. So I never felt like that was something I needed. So fast forward into December, as I'm coming into Gavin's anniversary of his death, I ended up, basically we're at work and had this full-blown panic attack that I had never experienced. And I just was like, what is going on? And I had so many, you know, tapes going on between handling my children, their schedules, arguing, you know, over the divorce and all the things that entails, and also approaching this anniversary, like everything just flooded me. And so I ended up calling him and I said, you know, I think I need to go. I think I need to go there. So I went into the church that night and was embraced by the recovery pastor and a few people who I knew. And I just knew that was where I needed to be.
And so Dustin was your friend that year, and then
turned into boyfriend.
Yeah. Okay. So that's when you said he.
Yeah.
That's who you're talking about.
Yes.
And so then he had kind of directed you toward Celebrate Recovery. You kind of resisted because I believe, didn't you say that your ex-husband had gone through recovery maybe and just kind of teetered back and forth?
I had attended AA meetings with him.
Right.
He had gone through a rehab program. So in my mind, anything related to that was all related to the past that I've already dealt
and
with.
You were like, I'm through with that.
Yes.
And I can relate with that.
Yeah.
I just on a quick, my ex-husband, drugs and alcohol,
Yes.
8 years after I was divorced, you know, became a criminal.
Yeah.
And so all I was going to add to that is that I remember my attorney saying, you should go to Al-Anon meetings. And I was so
It's like
angry.
the last thing you want to do.
I was like, I divorced him 8 years ago.
Yes.
Like, why? And my arms were crossed. I was so
Yes.
mad. I was like, why do I have to go learn how to deal with him? But what I learned and what you probably learned a lot along the way is that codependency
Yes.
that we were stuck in, you'll drag into your new relationship. And
Yes.
that's probably part of, along with the healing of Gavin and then healing with everything that went on with his dad.
Prior,
And
yes.
yeah. So you started in that program. Did you think, I'm just going to go one time? And
Well, so the first time I went, I was already hooked. I was like, yes, this is where I need to be. They just
Really?
had it. Well, at our church, you know, the music is so powerful and the community is very powerful at our Celebrate Recovery. And so I just knew it was the place I needed to be.
Yeah.
So I ended up going maybe for about 2 or 3 weeks. And after the new year, and I got through Gavin's anniversary, I signed up for my first 12-step program.
okay.
And so I was with a group of ladies, wonderful group of ladies who supported me and surrounded me and helped me process all the things that had led up to my divorce, had my mistakes in my marriage, you know, the things from my childhood that brought me to the places where I was, on top of Gavin's death. So, I mean, it was so intense. That wasn't the only program that I did for my healing. I also attended in the middle, well, I would say after I graduated that 12-step, I went to another program called Zach's Ridge, which is no longer in place.
Okay.
But through that program, Gretna Carey, who's now passed, she was the founder who had also lost a child.
Okay.
And so she ended up looking me in my eyes when I went to this, and she said, you may be here because of what happened to you, but we're here to work on who you were before that. And that just got me to my core because it helped me realize I'm not defined by this event that happened in my life. I'm not defined by being a bereaved mom and having lost a child. I'm defined by God's purpose and plan for my life, not what happened.
That just gave me chills.
But it's true.
It's true. That's why it did.
Yes.
It's real. And
And it did that when she looked me dead in my eyes. And I was like, okay.
you're like, oh,
I was here for this, but then, and then
Yeah.
that's just when so many other doors of healing came.
well, I think too, people have these things in their life and just like you realized, There's so much more.
There's so much more.
And when you say a 12-step program, you know, sometimes people think immediately of drugs and alcohol or something. Hey, listeners, we all have.
Yes. Well,
we all have situations that we need healing from.
We have hurts, habits, and hang-ups, and that's what we say at CR.
Yeah.
Is it's for anyone with a hurt, habit, or hang-up, and I had a lot of hang-ups and a lot of hurts.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's true. I mean, me too. I mean, we all no. I know what you're saying, because sometimes we think that's for somebody else, or let's look at how we can help them. But for her to have said that to you, and that just came full circle for your healing, and it probably, don't you feel like it gave you, I don't know, like a light to say, okay, I've got work to do. God's got a plan for me to help other people heal through this, and also to move on. What do you think those look like? Like, is that one of the categories? And then what have you gone through since that you have stepped into, like your Kardia Wellness and the other things?
So through that program, they ended up basically like helping us create a mission. And it said, her phrase was, your purpose is created out of the pain that you went through. And so I wrote out that my mission is to help others through tragedy and trauma. And so I had to really research what that looked like. This is 2 years ago.
Okay.
I had already enrolled for my master's degree like in 2015. So 2 years prior to even before Gavin dying.
Okay.
But after all that happened, I never saw the light of what that would look like. What would I do? You know, after going through what I've gone through, I couldn't vision managing people's blood pressure versus the healing and the gifts that I've received since what I've gone through. So I've had to research, you know, what does that look like between ministry and medicine?
Okay.
You know, how does this all combine together? So through all my research and everything like that, I also had graduated from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, which is based out of New York, in 2012. So this is even God working 8 years ago that I wasn't even aware of what he was doing, you know? And so through that program, I learned tools to become a certified health coach and help people, you know, analyze their life, put them through a program, things like that. And so with that knowledge, plus my life events, plus recovery, plus, you know, nurse practitioner school, I mean, it's everything, right? So my goal is to help others through tragedy and trauma through my practice. I have a vision and I have a plan, but I just don't know how it'll be executed.
But what I like about that is that you have faith that God's going to bring, you know, the point is we don't have to know.
No.
We're not supposed to know each plan. Now, it's hard as a human being to not go, I want to see it on paper.
Yes.
And I want to see plan step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep.
But when we do that, we're in control.
Right. Which is totally how I am.
Well, me too. And I've had to learn, put that aside. I mean,
you just have to be obedient.
And
that's what I've learned. I just have to be obedient to what he's telling me I need to do. And I do that, and it leads me to my next place.
It does.
And that's what I'm doing.
Yep.
So.
And I know, and I think that's another place we've connected. I know Anna also went up to New York. Can you tell us a little bit about that through this process?
Sure.
Tell us about New York.
Okay, so, well, we connected. Why did we connect about New York? Because you used to live there.
Yeah.
Yep. So basically when COVID-19 struck, my husband owns a barbershop and we had to shut down our business. We were already in the middle of a huge financial situation that has just been a struggle for us ever since we met, really. So that's been a really huge thing in our relationship, to where we've had to learn how to overcome these obstacles so early. Like, talk about honeymoon phase. It's been nothing but hardship. So when COVID happened, I was sitting at work. They were starting to cut back hours at the job I had. They were starting to let go of some people. And I had a friend who had taken an assignment up in New York to fight COVID. And I was sitting at my job knowing that these things were probably coming, and witnessed that Navy ship come into the bay of the city, you know, with the Red Cross. And I just saw that, and I was like, God, I got to go. Like, this is my opportunity. Like, I have to do this. So by the grace of God, I got a job assignment that was such a blessing. It helped us cover financially everything that we needed to keep our business alive. It helped us pay off an insurmountable amount of debt that was caused by somebody else in our life. And it was just a huge opportunity for us. And at the same time, I was able to serve. And I worked in a long-term care facility for elderly patients. I was on a COVID unit and had a few residents pass away, helped others recover after getting the virus, and made a lot of friends, really. And it was just a huge life experience.
And good food.
Amazing food.
Amazing food, healthy food that we wish, right? I heard you saying, we could have more of that here, and maybe we will.
Yes.
Maybe you'll be that the leader in that, because I agree.
Yes.
Something else. So I know my daughter and I had moved to Sag Harbor to kind of start over years ago after her dad had abandoned her, and then I had full custody, so I could go anywhere. So we moved just by a quick interview, and then moved up there, and it was peaceful and calming, and I didn't have to worry looking behind my shoulder.
Absolutely.
And we could, kind of like you said, that did happen to you, but it's not for the rest of your life what you're defined by. Not that you're running from it, but God's got more in store for you. So what had happened with us is we didn't want to be defined by what he had drug us into. So by moving to the Hamptons, we could just be us.
And I think that's why God worked so much in my life in New York, because I was able to be away from where everything happened. I mean, I've grown up where I live my entire life. I was a young mom. I got pregnant when I was 18. So, never had the opportunity to move away and live in a dorm or have that normal college experience or any of that stuff. And so then for everything to happen that did, divorce and my son drown, I needed away, and I got away. And just the time alone to process, to grieve, to just have a better perspective and a bigger perspective on my life. Like, it was just huge for me. And it was such a gift. All of it was such a gift.
That had been already 3 years.
Yes.
So you'd gone through all this healing, but yet you still felt like, and I know you told me the place that you found. I know when we were talking, and you said, I'm going to have, I think you said 4 days off. And I said, oh, you've got to go to the Hamptons because you just have to go. And then you took upon your own research and found an amazing place in East Hampton.
Yes.
Tell us about the healing that you feel like you went through just by taking that time away for yourself.
It just gave me such inner perspective. Just, really while I was there, I did a lot of writing. And so I was able to look back on some of the pieces of writing I've done and edit them and review them and just really grieve over the time marks of everything that had happened. The beach was right there, so I was near the water. I've always felt closer to God when I'm in the water, near the water. He saved my life in the water. So, I mean, it was just beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you had that healing time before you came back. Now,
Yes.
I just thought of something.
Okay.
This is kind of a difficult one. Can you tell me how you were able to forgive the people that, not your children, but the adults that were supposedly watching Gavin? How do you walk through, or how did you, or how are you still walking through forgiveness?
Forgiveness is a really big deal, and it's something that I've had to learn. It's something that's a choice. So I made the choice to forgive, even though I never really did in my heart for a long time. I would say today I fully forgive and I extend grace, but there has yet to be any conversation, true conversation, real conversation about what happened. So I've had to come to peace, and that forgiveness only comes from God, because he and I have had to process it, and I haven't been able to process all of that with those people. Those are relationships that God removed from my life. So the choice to forgive, it's just a daily choice, The anger comes back, definitely comes back every birthday and every New Year's. It just all resurfaces. And this past August was Gavin's 4th birthday without him, on earth. And so every time that date comes, I would think it would get easier. And I don't know that it does. I can't say that it does.
Yeah.
I think you manage it better over time with your grief, but those anniversary dates are always very triggering. So I have to remind myself of where I've come from in that forgiveness when those times come up.
Okay, that's really important because I know, and we've all had things, and it's like here where I am in my spiritual walk, I know better.
Yeah,
I know
better.
I've
learned.
I know. I've been through the process of just that crying out, that screaming out.
Yes.
I say when I did that, it was like the devil was coming out of my
Absolutely.
mouth. I was so you understand.
Oh,
that.
I do.
But as you walk along in your life, you have things come up that, or whether it's something from the past, that it's amazing how instantaneously you can be brought back, even though
Yes.
and you've been walking along, you can be right back in that very emotional moment.
And that's part of trauma.
Yeah, because I experienced something like that about over 10 years being around somebody, and I have a close girlfriend, Shelly, and she just, that makes me want to cry because I was like that instantaneous, as angry as you were the day that it happened. And she said, Erika, you've been through the road adventure. You've been through this healing. Don't let them take that from you. Don't let them take your joy. Don't let them have any of that kind of power over you.
Absolutely.
We were in the same room. I talked to him like an old teacher I didn't like anymore, that you have to be polite to when you see in the grocery store. It just flipped, but I needed that reminder, and I'm just grateful, and I know you are too, with having those people surrounded in your life that are, Christ-centered people that can lift you up when you fall into that pit.
Yes.
So Anna, when anniversaries come, birthday, the date of his death, or the tragedy that happened, how do you get through feeling like cheated or ripped off from going through your mind of what his life could have been, and how do you work through those emotions?
So I would say that leading up to those dates, whether I'm conscious or unaware of it, my entire physical and emotional self just becomes chaos, really, internally. I may still be going to my job. I may still be taking care of my kids, but inside I'm just writhing. And it's taken the last 4 years to figure out how to deal with that. For the first year, I drank a lot. The second year, I turned to other things that were not so healthy for me. And it took almost a rock bottom moment for me to realize, like, what are you doing, Anna? Like, you cannot continue and use this as an excuse to be in these places, to be in these dark places. So I had to flip it, right? And so this last birthday, I wouldn't say I was perfect. Still definitely leading up to it, I kind of get in my own little way. Like, for me, one of the things I do is I like to redo everything. So I reorganize, or I repaint, or I, do things like that. And if that's what it takes for me to get through that, then that should be okay.
Yeah.
I've had to teach the people who I live with and who surround me that when these things are going on, when you see me this way, make sure I'm okay, but let me go through this because I need to feel this stuff. I need to feel it. I need to go through it, because I delayed a lot of it in the beginning. I think a lot of people who suffer from tragedy, trauma, especially grief, we go through a huge denial phase. And so the longer that we put off processing those emotions, they're going to resurface tenfold later. So you have to feel it. You have to go through it, but you have to make sure you have healthy coping mechanisms in place as you go through those emotions.
And people surrounding you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Accountability.
Accountabilities.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Accountability.
important. And that's key. Yeah. We need to know these things because people don't know.
People don't know. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it took a year of chaos navigating what life looked like after losing a child. And that's, again, part of my purpose. And later, once God reveals how I'm supposed to do all this, like, people need somebody to guide them through these times.
Well, and I just thought I hope this is okay to ask.
Sure, anything.
Because I know someone that has lost her only 2 sons. They were young.
20s. And she's a dear friend and she's precious, but I'm sure, there's a lot of listeners out there that have lost a child and they need this for their healing to hear this. What do you say when people say, that's a normal thing? Are you're married and how many children do you have?
Yep.
How do you answer that?
It took a long time to decide how I would answer that.
Mm-hmm.
And it changed. I would practice on my patients as they would ask me.
Yeah.
I changed my answer. But I say I have 2 beautiful bonus kids, and I have my own daughter who's 11, my son who's 8, and I have a child in heaven who would be 6.
Did you find yourself not mentioning just so you wouldn't have to mention? Because I
wanted to know what that felt like if I were to deny that I had him.
Well,
and it was wrong. It felt wrong to me.
The friend I'm talking about, she and I spoke on, detailed conversation about this. And there's times that when people say how many children you have, she says, she doesn't have any. Now, when I first heard that,
sure,
of course, and I know her and she's a sweet, precious person, I was like, oh, how could she say that?
Sometimes you just don't have the energy to go into that.
And that's what I want to say. I learned that's okay too.
It absolutely is
because
okay.
She said, I can't even go if I say one and then I say another, and she's pretty young, to go into that. So it's okay to say that. You're not denying that child. You're just emotionally, you don't know anybody.
You don't know anybody an explanation.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say you have 50 kids and what's it to them? They don't know you.
They don't know you.
So to each their own. That's all a part of somebody's grief journey, and all a part of how they choose to walk in grief after their loss.
Yeah.
For me, I still claim Gavin. He was my baby. He was my pride and joy. I went through so many things with him as a baby, so he was absolutely huge part of my life, you know. But there are times when people do ask, if I don't feel like they're a safe person or I don't want to go into the conversation of how he died, I'll just, either not include him or just say, I have 3 of my own, you know, whatever.
3 of your own, and you do.
Yeah, I do. I do.
One's
in heaven.
One in heaven, but they don't need, no, but I'm glad that I know that was a hard question for me to ask, but probably something real healing for people to know that it's okay to say that.
You don't owe anybody anything.
True. That's so true. You don't owe them. And,
you don't.
And learning that about, we don't have to please people.
We don't. Because that's codependency, people.
Yep. There you go. Right there. 101. Don't have to please people.
Yep.
Oh, gosh. I mean, I know that your story is just going to touch a lot of people's lives. And not only for the fact of course, you hear your story. And like I felt the first time I heard it, I just wanted to give you a big hug. But to be able to walk through, let people know that you can walk through healing no matter what your tragedy is.
Yes.
Because if you turn to God for those things, He will bring you peace. It may take a while.
It does take a while.
It takes a while, but He'll bring you peace like you couldn't get any other way. I mean, because without Him as our Savior, you may have still been down the road of whatever, drinking or, not that.
Yeah. No, I would have been dead in my swimming pool. That's what would have happened.
Wow.
But He saved me.
He saved you.
He saved me.
And now it's, your story to share with others to be able to help save them. Because what do? God wants us all to be His disciples and to share. He can't do it all. Sometimes God with skin on.
Yep. We can't keep it to ourselves.
That's right.
It's meant to be shared.
Meant to be shared. Like we talked the other day, you're going to come to the Amazing Grace Retreat that we have here in Texas. So you guys, if you want to meet Anna, no, she's like, oh my goodness. That's going to be in Dripping Springs. That is Christ-centered retreats and workshops. And if you want to know a little bit more about the retreats, you can go to amazinggraceretreat.org. I'm just grateful that you came by here. You're so cute. You're so beautiful. And that you were open to come by and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
With us, yeah.
Thank you for letting me share.
Thanks, Anna.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Please subscribe to the podcast, write a good review if you like, and share with your friends on social media. We'll see you next time on Amazing Grace Talk.